Hello, my friends. It's your buddy Phil here. Let's get straight into our questions for today. This is level 6. We start off with this one. You are on an Agile team currently in the early stage that has envisioned two major releases. Both involve the same number of iterations, resulting in release durations of 3 months. Management encourages you to follow Agile principles. Which of the following would you follow? All right, I'm going to show the answer, so very quickly round up or hit the pause button. So, if you take a look at option B, following a rigid plan is not an agile principle. So, the same approach that I use here, I need you to use on the exam. Cancel anything that is not a valid answer. So, follow a rigid plan, we'll cancel that. Let's go to option C. Option C states prioritize scope over schedule. Prioritize scope over schedule is dubious, right? You don't prioritize scope over schedule. That doesn't make sense. You need to weigh in both what is a time box and what can we get done in the time box. You wouldn't say we're going to do this whole bunch of scope and we don't care about the time box. So you don't prioritize scope over schedule in the world of Agile. You do want to change according to what the customer needs and within sensibilities that the product owner deems fit. But you wouldn't just blank everything regarding schedule and say, well, we're going to prioritize scope. You wouldn't do that. So that's not founded advice. Let's take a look at D. Encourage team members to work independently. Now, while that sounds good, it's actually anti-agile. It is against the grain of agile, right? It's not an agile principle. Agile teams are meant to work in a collaborative fashion. They're meant to focus on communication, collective ownership of the work, and so on. So when all is said and done, the best answer is A, right? The Azure Manifesto tells us that our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable product, valuable software. This principle emphasizes the importance of understanding and addressing the needs of the customer, right? So that is the best answer, okay? Let's move on to the next one. Jackson is a project manager on a large-scale construction project. The company has been using an adaptive life cycle for the past 3 months. However, the sponsor does not understand why this is described as adaptive. Which of the following is a characteristic of an adaptive life cycle? All right. Let's round up in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so let's start from the top. A, predetermined schedule and budget. That means everything is planned up front. That's not true. So we're going to cancel A. The predetermination does not happen in this world of Agile. You could say that for predictive, but not for Agile. Option B, detailed project plan and documentation. Again, this is not a characteristic of Agile. Agile projects are more focused on deliverables and results than on documentation. So we're going to cancel that. Take a look at option C, emphasizing individual tasks over team collaboration. That is not a characteristic of Agile. Agile teams work collaboratively and they focus on collective ownership of the work. So we're going to cancel that. And then we have option D that says flexibility and adaptability to change. That's the one you want. That's Agile through and through. All right, I'm sure you got that one easy. All right, let's move on to the next question. You are a project team, a project lead on a medium-sized project at Company Extra. They have been using Agile approaches and identified a new requirement that would be beneficial to the project, but is not included in the current scope. The team has completed the development of the current sprint and has no capacity to include the new requirement in the next sprint. How should the team handle this? Give you some time to think. All right. So let's go down the list. Ignore the requirement and continue with the current scope. It's like saying bury your head in the sand and act like nothing happened. That is not being agile. That is not being sensible. That is not being proactive. So we're going to cancel that. Okay. We don't ignore when those things happen, right? It's not a good practice. It's obvious in the world of agile, requirements could change the objectives of the project, and it does need to be evaluated. B, add the stories to the last sprint if the stakeholders agree. This doesn't make sense. It's asking you to add stories to a sprint that has either been concluded, if we can read the word last, meaning the previous sprint, or if this means the final sprint. Why would you add requirements to the final sprint, whenever that is? That could be 15 sprints from now. We don't know. So we're going to cancel that. Let's look at option C. Discuss the release with the sponsor and determine if it should be added to the scope. Now, while this sounds good, this is the world of Agile, and this is not the kind of thing that you would do with a sponsor in an Agile world. Okay, let's read between the lines. What does it say? The team has completed the development of the current sprint, has no capacity to handle the requirement in the next sprint. They don't have the capacity, that's one. And two, this role of the sponsor makes it even more of a dubious option. See, they identified a new requirement that would be beneficial, but then again, this character, the sponsor, gives concern for this option. So we're going to cancel it for now and take a look at D. Discuss the requirement with the product owner. That would be the right person, because this is the chief value officer, unspoken, who is a representative of the business. So the best answer is D. Okay, I know it's close, but let's take a look at something else that makes C an incorrect option. It says discuss the release. We're not talking about a release here. You see how that word was smuggled in. It's not a release that we should be talking about. We should be talking about a requirement. So C is definitely not the answer. Okay, so be on the lookout for little words like that that try to sneak by. Okay, let's move on to the next one. You are the project lead of a medium-sized engineering project. In the first iteration, your team has identified a new requirement that would be beneficial to the project but is not included in the current scope. How should the team handle this situation? So let's see, we have ignore the requirement and continue with the current scope. Add the requirement to the scope without discussing it with the stakeholders. Discuss the requirement with the stakeholders and determine if it should be added to the scope through a scope change request process. And then we have add the requirement to the scope without any further considerations. So it uses the word iteration. Iteration could mean it's an iterative project. It doesn't mean it's necessarily agile, because there's nothing here that mentions agile specifically. So pretty much everything here is fair game, for this question. But we wouldn't ignore the requirement, so that's got to go. We wouldn't add the requirement without discussing it. That would be dumb. And we wouldn't add the requirement to the scope without any further consideration. You do need to consider the impact. You do need to do some sort of impact analysis. So the best answer, my friends, is option C. Okay. All right, let's move on to one more question for the day. Let's do this one. All right. Jenny is a servant leader with 5 teams she is serving within an agile environment. One of the teams has just reported they missed an important deadline. What should Jenny do? A. Ignore the delay and continue with the original schedule while the project manager brainstorms. B. Replan the schedule without involving the stakeholders and use critical path theorems to realign. C. Communicate delays to stakeholders and collaborate to replan the schedule and adjust objectives. And D. Replan the schedule without considering the impact on the project objectives since this is an agile team. All right. So, my friends, again, we're going to use the process of elimination. Hit the pause button if you need more time. We're just going through this. You wouldn't ignore the delay. That wouldn't be sensible. Okay. And you wouldn't say, oh, ignore the delay, let's continue with the original schedule while the project manager brainstorms. Well, the project manager needs a team to brainstorm, so it's not very good advice. B, replan the schedule without involving the stakeholders. That's not good, doesn't make sense. You should involve the stakeholders before going fully into changing the plan. And C, communicate delays to stakeholders and collaborate to replan. Doesn't sound bad. And D, replan the schedule without considering the impact. So D and A are pretty much same thing. So the best option here is communicate the delays and collaborate to replan the schedule and adjust objectives. All right, my friends. Well, that's all we have for now. I hope you found these to be helpful. Remember that on your exam, you are likely going to have quite a lot of hybrid. I know a lot of folks have said this recently. You are going to get some real hybrid focus, many of you. And then you will have the predictive piece, which people say is not as big as they used to report. And then we have the agile piece. And honestly, it seems like predictive is truly looking these days like a 50%. And agile and predictive, they're kind of looking, shifting between 30, 20, 20, 30. Really depends on who you speak to. That's what I keep getting feedback about. So you might want to keep that in mind as you get ready for your exam. Think about questions that offer both an agile component and a predictive component. All right, thank you very much. I hope you found this to be useful. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, share with your friends, and remember to balance up hybrid if you're lacking in it. Take care, my friends, and bye for now.